to have somebody come up in front of us with one of those, whatever they are that Hollywood uses.
Test.
Oh, really?
When you guys speak into the microphone, honestly,
Testing, one.
Yeah, it's working.
it's not coming through on the YouTube version. This thing's so finicky.
Technology.
It's a computer.
This is so you can be on TV.
Yeah.
Just can't hear it.
Well, don't seem to. Here we go. I might have got it. Talking to the mic now. See.
Test one, test one. Is he catching it?
It's like a 10-second delay, so I had to wait. It might be more than a 10 second.
Does it pick up the audio
I
straight?
don't know. It's not picking it up. for
straight
some
off?
reason. Oh, there it goes. It's picking up the audio now. Okay, you're good to go.
All right. Okay, we're cleared for takeoff. Welcome everyone to the City of Sandy Planning Commission meeting for Monday, February 24th, 2020. We'll open the meeting at 7:03 with a roll call.
Commissioner Carlton is excused. Commissioner Lasowski.
Here.
Commissioner McLean-Wenzel.
Here.
Commissioner Logan.
Here.
Commissioner Mobley.
Here.
Commissioner Mairin.
Here.
And Chairman Crosby.
Here. We have a quorum. We have a packet, in our packet we had the minutes from our last meeting, February 11. Anybody note any changes, corrections, or additions, subtractions? If not, we'll take a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes from the February 11th meeting.
I'll second that motion.
Been moved and seconded to approve the minutes for February 11, 2020 as presented. All in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay. Those are in the books. And this is the time for every one of our meetings where we give opportunity for just general citizen communication on non-agenda items. If you're here tonight and would like to speak to the Planning Commission on a matter that is not on our agenda tonight, now is the time to step to the podium, all right? And recognize you. You know the routine, your name and your address for the record.
My name is Makoto Lane. I live at 37828 Rachel Drive. And I didn't attend the last meeting, although I did find out that you guys approved the Bailey Meadows development proposal, despite overwhelming evidence that it does not comply with certain ordinances within the city, and also the fact that they've basically come in and extorted us to develop their project. What I mean by extorting us is that they've threatened lawsuits time and time again unless we allow them to develop how we want, and not only that, that we subsidize them. We give them money and pay for their intersection and the road up to their development. And I'm just, not just me, but a large percentage of the community does not approve of that. It's very disappointing that you guys would make that decision. And I understand that y'all are scared of getting sued by a developer, but really I think your job should be to protect us and stand up for us, not roll over to developers, predatory developers at that. Come to find out, that attorney that works with them is pretty, has a history of finding loopholes in communities and planning codes and exploiting it for the benefit of the developer. I don't feel comfortable with my tax dollars paying for the developer's brand new Audi or whatever, Porsche or new mansion that he's gonna get from this project. You know, the money that they save from not paying for infrastructure, I'm assuming will probably be used for personal luxury items. And it's a direct correlation there. Again, I'm just disappointed in that decision. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Okay, we will move on. We have 3 public hearings this evening, and we'll move right into the first one and open that public hearing at 7:07. This is file 19-047. Mairin's, is that, how do you say it? Mairin's.
Yes.
Mairin's Viewpoint, plat extension request. Okay, I'll call for any abstentions from planning commissioners. Nothing? Any conflict of interest to declare? Nothing? Any ex parte contact to declare? Okay, nothing familiar with the site where it is. Call for the challenges to the jurisdiction of the hearing body, or any challenge to any individual member of the hearing body. Okay, if you testify, you must raise all issues at this hearing. Your comments should state why the application should or should not be approved, or include proposed modifications you believe are necessary for approval according to the standards. If you do not raise specific issues at the final evidentiary hearing or by close of the record, or fail to provide statements or evidence to allow the local government or its designee to respond to the issue, you will not be able to appeal the decision to the Land Use Board of Appeals based on that particular issue. Failure of the applicant to raise constitutional or other issues relating to the proposed conditions of approval with sufficient specificity to allow the local government or its designee to respond to the issue precludes an action for damages in circuit court. Any party has the right to request a continuance of the public hearing, or in the alternative, to have the record remain open. Staff report.
Okay, I'm gonna try to make this one really short. I don't have a presentation or anything. So basically, I approved the subdivision on December 8th, 2017. It's a 6-lot subdivision. So basically be 5 new houses. The existing house will remain on a new lot that's platted. I granted an extension on April 30th, 2019. The code currently doesn't allow the director to grant any more than 1 extension. I think it's something that in the future I want to take before you. I think it's a little bit too quick. Most cities give a 2-year tentative plat approval with a 1-year extension by the director. Ours is a 1-year plat approval with 1 extension of a year by the director. It's really too quick of a turnaround for some subdivisions. And then at the end of the first year, or if I extend it, which I pretty much always do, basically you have to have the subdivision constructed and recorded at the county as individual lots, or you have to have all of the public right-of-way and infrastructure improvements bonded, and then you can record it over at the county. So in this case, they haven't moved forward with those items yet, but they're looking to get an additional year extended onto the plat. So that would give them until at least December 8th, 2020 to either make all of the improvements and record the subdivision, or bond all of the improvements and record the subdivision. The other thing you could do is, if you wanted to, there's nothing in the code saying you couldn't go beyond a year. So if you want to, you could go beyond a year. Or you could make tonight the new, it could be 1 year from tonight instead of 1 year from December 8th, 2019. So I think there's a lot of different options. As I laid out in the staff report, the typical reason why you don't want to extend it too long is because the code does change sometimes, and then if the subdivision or the development doesn't occur, sometimes we'd like to revisit it and that's why you have limitations, so. That's pretty much all I had. We did post it in the Sandy Post on February 12th. And then just the recommendation is to hear from the applicant, hear from anybody else that wants to testify tonight. And then we're recommending approval to at least December 8th, 2020.
Okay. Any questions of staff? Yep. All right, applicant presentation.
Good evening, and thank you for your time. I'm John Mahaffey, 16800 Southeast Maple Hill Lane, Happy Valley. Thank you. We have a mortgage on the property, which to get the plat recorded requires the consent from the lender. And so we needed to get the subdivision drawn up and approvable. And by the time that was done, I started meeting or contacting the lender, and I'm not going to mention the names because I don't want to say anything disparaging about any particular lender. But we started on April 12th of last year, making contact, etc. And it led to people that weren't answering the calls, didn't know what they were doing. So I finally went down to one of the branches and had a great meeting. Of course, it went nowhere, but I felt really good when I walked out of the meeting. So then I finally thought there's got to be some kind of an oversight, governmental oversight. And as a last resort, I called that person, and her name's Joyce Pierce, and she works for the state of Oregon. And so I mentioned to her my predicament, where it was sitting, and she says, oh, she said, you'll need to talk to so-and-so. Well, she knew the lady's name that was in charge of that department at the bank. And so the state would have regulatory provisions and guidelines against, or when working with the banks. And then all of a sudden they were extremely accommodating, and I got all kinds of good results. And then what they want is an appraisal and all of the paperwork. So I've ordered the appraisal, and it's done, ready to be issued. And the bank would say that it needs to be within 6 months. It can't age any more than 6 months, and so I don't want the appraiser to write up the report until that point in time. So that's what's led to this. And what Kelly was saying has got great prudence, because you can get the preliminary approval, but then it's got to be drawn up and work back and forth with the city, which they've been great to work with. But then all of a sudden you're running into this time frame, and most of the people probably would have a mortgage on there, and they have to get that consent just to record the plat. And so that's where I'm at. And thank you for your time. I'll take any questions you want. But I've got just reams of paperwork, emails, and these are all phone calls we made. And so this was typed up by our staff person. These are my other calls that are just my handwritten ones. And it was a good exercise in patience. So thank you, guys.
I have one question for you before you sit down. It's easier
Sure.
to ask you now. The recommendation is to December 8. Are you comfortable with that?
I would even, I would love to say yes, but if you would grant it from this time for a year, I mean, I think we'll be okay, but I just don't trust him anymore. I'm sorry, I don't know how to say it nicer.
No, we
but
understand.
yeah.
No, that's
But
good.
a few more months would just at least take the stress off of me.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm trying to work as diligently as I can on it, so
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Thank you.
thank you, folks.
Thank you. Okay, any proponent testimony? If you are in favor of the application, would like to speak, now is your time. Quickly. Or if you are opposed, you're not in favor, now is the time to speak. Or if you have a question, or you're neutral. All right, we're moving quickly here. I don't know that you'll have much of a recap, Kelly.
No, I mean, as I think the staff report states it, but basically if I was to, if this was to be denied and Mr. Mahaffey came through our office again, I don't think there would be anything, there might be a few small, tiny things we're doing a little bit different than in December 2017, but there's been no substantive code changes that would make a big difference on the approval. I think it would almost be almost verbatim. There'd probably be some slight little tweaks, but I would recommend approving it.
Okay. I don't think that gives you anything to rebut, so we can either close or just go to discussion. Any questions?
He answered.
Thoughts?
I was gonna ask, what's changed in the code since he originally applied, and he just said very minimal or to nothing, so.
Very minimal.
That answered my question, because, yeah, if we don't extend it, he could just reapply and have the same provisions, so it just seems,
Seems silly.
it seems silly.
Yeah, no, and just to clarify, nothing has changed in the, there's some code changes that have happened, but nothing has changed in the land division chapter. So, yeah, if anything did change, it would be really minor, and it wouldn't make the end result or the product of the 6-lot subdivision any different.
The only comment I have is probably from doing this in the past is, Don was in here, the slippery slope, picking just instead of going out a year to the December 8th, and then adding on a few more months, people will come back, and even though each one of these cases is its own entity, people come back and say, well, you gave that person 15 months as opposed to the year. I mean, I'm just more of a technical point. So.
Does it set, I guess this is more for David, does this set a precedence by giving that extension to say February 24th, 2021, does it create precedence for future applicants to argue that?
I'll let David add on to this, but it's a quasi-judicial decision, so you wouldn't be setting any legal precedence. Now, whether it sets perceived preference, that might be a different
Right.
question, but you'd be under no legal obligation to grant the same thing in the future. Do you want to add on to that, David?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think Kelly's right. I mean, generally in a quasi-judicial setting, what you do for one, you're doing for others unless, the facts are different, the law is different. So, I mean, I think whenever you have these, you're sort of analyzing what the, specific facts are. In this case, you heard testimony about, having some issues with respect to financing and appraisals. I don't think it's anything that means everybody else that comes in that may be in a similar situation, you have to grant it. What I would say is that, and I think this would be the planning commission's, approach to these anyway, is that you'd probably be asking yourself, well, we did grant one in this case. Is there anything that's really different about what's in front of us now? Some theoretical future application. And, if there isn't, then it's probably something that you would grant again in the future as well. The code doesn't speak to this, and I think if you were to say, we grant it from today's date, I certainly don't see an issue with that, and it's not something that if you were presented with another request and the facts are much different, that you wouldn't be able to say, either deny it or, go at have that year run from a different date.
Okay. Other comments?
Well, I appreciate what Ron said. I think in this case, financing can be an issue sometimes and not other times. I'm fine with going ahead to go for a year out from today. That would be my.
I am too. In the world of extensions, it still doesn't seem like a real long one, so
No.
I don't have any problems with that.
Okay, let's go ahead then. Somebody close our public hearing, and then we can have a motion.
I'll move we close the public hearing.
Second.
Who's taking that?
We had a tie.
We have
Hol-
tie.
We'll let Hollis take this one.
Rock, paper, scissors.
he's already had made a motion, so.
Good, that's, the previous minute sample already had that too, so.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to close the public hearing at 7:21. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, we are closed and we will take a motion.
Chair, I'll go ahead and make the motion to extend Mairin's Viewpoint Plat Extension 19-047 to February 24th, 2021.
Second.
Okay, been moved and seconded to grant the extension to, for 1 year from today to February 24, 2021. Take a roll call vote.
Commissioner Lasowski,
Yes.
Commissioner Quinn Wenzel,
Yes.
Commissioner Logan.
Yes.
Commissioner Mobley,
Yes.
Commissioner Mairin,
Yes.
and Chairman Crosby.
Yes, motion carries. Okay. We'll move right along and to the next one, which we will open.
Thank you for doing that.
Oh, you're welcome.
The name was after one of our granddaughters who happens to be staying the night with us, so.
Nice.
That's good luck.
That's fine.
All right, so at 7:23, we will open public hearing number 19-037, McCormick Drive zone change request. Any abstentions from the hearing body? None, or any conflict of interest to declare?
No.
Nothing? Any ex parte contact to declare, and we're familiar with the location? Okay, I'll call for a challenge to the jurisdiction of the Planning Commission, or any challenge to any individual member of the Planning Commission. Okay, you heard this before, but I have to say it again. If you testify, you must raise all issues at this hearing. Your comments should state why the application should or should not be approved, or include proposed modifications you believe are necessary for approval according to the standards. If you do not raise specific issues at the final evidentiary hearing or by close of the record, or fail to provide statements or evidence to allow the local government or its designee to respond to the issue, you will not be able to appeal the decision to the Land Use Board of Appeals based on that particular issue. Failure of the applicant to raise constitutional or other issues relating to the proposed conditions of approval with sufficient specificity to allow the government or its designee to respond to the issue precludes inaction for damages in circuit court. Any party has the right to request a continuance of the public hearing, or in the alternative, to have the record remain open. Staff reports. We need to turn this one on.
I think so. I don't know how well these are working.
Right to the right of it. To the right of it, right there. One more time. Oh, good. There you go. Good job.
All right. So tonight we're looking at a zone change and comprehensive plan change request on McCormick Drive. So the property is located on the south side of Highway 26 between Wolf and Langenstand, right where Van Fleet tees into McCormick. And the request is to change the comprehensive plan designation from commercial to medium density residential, and the zoning designation from general commercial to medium density residential. And the property is 2.47 acres. So looking at the comp plan map here, the property is kind of outlined in a thicker black there. So the red is commercial, the kind of light yellow below it is low density residential, and the orange is medium density residential. So that's the comp plan designations, and then the zoning map looks pretty similar. So again, the orange is medium density residential, or R2. The red is general commercial, or C2, and then the lightish pale yellow is single family residential. So that's just to kind of put it into context. So again, the request is to change from general commercial in the red there to medium density residential, which would be the orange, like the R2. So just kind of going through a few facts. So in February 2017, we adopted the urban growth boundary expansion analysis, and that report identified a 3.6 acre surplus of commercial and a 17.1 acre surplus of medium density residential, and that was for the 20-year planning horizon. So rezoning this approximately 2.5 acre property from commercial to medium density residential would affect those numbers. So it would reduce the commercial surplus to 1.1 acres and increase the medium density residential surplus to 19.6 acres. I think that's kind of one of the key things to just think about. So it doesn't put us in a deficit, it just reduces the surplus for commercial. Couple other things to keep in mind just about the specific zones and what's allowed. So if you remember recently, we updated the C2 zone, and it does now allow housing above ground floor commercial as an outright permitted use. And then whereas R2, the outright permitted uses are residential, but it does allow some commercial uses through a conditional use permit process. One other thing is currently zoned, as it's zoned C2, it would need to have a landscape buffer along Highway 26. That's in our codes, that's a 20-foot deep buffer, at least 30% of the Highway 26 frontage, and that's applied to all of our commercial property now, but that would not be required from medium density residential. So last slide really is just to, so tonight you'll be forwarding a recommendation to council who will be making the decision. So we're just asking that you determine what recommendation you want to make. Think about how that reduction of the city's commercial land to the 1.1 acres, whether or not that's in compliance with the statewide goals, the zoning district amendments chapter and the comp plan. And if you do recommend if you do forward a recommendation of approval, then we're recommending that that landscape buffer be required with the R2 zone as well, or for this property.
Okay.
And that is all.
Any questions?
I do, actually. Can you go back to one of the first slides?
Yeah.
Nope, right after this one. The other one, sorry, the other
Other
way.
direction.
The other
Yeah.
direction.
The surplus.
There we go, the surplus, you caught that too? It's different than what's in the staff report.
I thought that.
In the staff report, it says 3.5 acre surplus on commercial land and 9.2 surplus on the medium density residential.
Yeah, so I
Before the
corrected that.
switch.
I guess it didn't correct in our system, I don't know.
Okay.
It was correct on my screen when I did it. So we originally had a January 2017 version of the urban growth expansion analysis. I don't know why the numbers changed between January and February, but they did.
Okay,
It was just a stack of documents in my bookshelf.
okay,
But yeah, I don't know, I went back and corrected that before it was uploaded, so I'm not sure
okay.
how a previous
Yeah.
one got there.
So your slide is correct.
Yes.
Okay.
So I have a question. That surplus doesn't seem very large. As the planning staff, do you have any concerns about that?
I mean, I don't know that the 3.6 is very large either compared to
Yeah,
a
well,
lot of our
exactly,
residential.
compared to the residential.
But Kelly might be able to speak more. He did the analysis. I think for DLCD, we just have to show a surplus in each land use type to show that we can accommodate the projected 20-year growth. I don't know if it dictates how big of a surplus though.
Yeah, we didn't want to make this, I mean, when I did the study, we didn't want to make the surpluses too large because then inevitably when you do that, then most likely you'd get more pushback from Thousand Friends of Oregon. And they had already made a bunch of comments regarding our UGB expansion, and we had fulfilled, I think, about 4/5 of their comments, some of which we decided not to fulfill because we thought they were overly burdensome. But we also didn't want to get too far out there or too ahead of ourselves and recommend surpluses that would then get appealed essentially. Looking back, maybe we should have bumped the commercial to 10 acres surplus instead of 3.6. But I think the bigger issue is really when we did the UGB expansion, we didn't anticipate that people would be coming in with requests to to be going from commercial back to residential. And tonight's the first of a few that you'll be seeing in the next few months, so, we can't anticipate these things because they just come in when they do. But we certainly did not think that was gonna be the case.
With it going to, if this goes through to residential, what about the connectivity and pedestrian connectivity? I mean, I'm looking at the site, went by it, you go by it all the time, and there's no sidewalks, so I'm assuming there'd be sidewalks in front of it, but as you go to the west, then they're at the church property, looking at it now, I don't think there's any sidewalks there.
Yeah, I mean, regardless of zone, if it were to develop, they would need to do sidewalk or frontage improvements on both on McCormick and the highway.
And maybe not one for here, just wondering as these things come through with the plans for the city with parks, et cetera, brought this up before with connectivity to other things, that people put these things in there, connectivity with bikes, pedestrian, that's planned, but then when you plop it into the commercial zones, it's not. This one here I'd say is a little different than that. It's mostly it's residential across the street, but it's just something I think to be aware of as we go forward.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I didn't look into the connectivity much. I'm trying to think if there would be differences in those two code sections. There probably would be, but I don't know. Do you?
I mean, the one thing is I don't know how practicable it is to actually have sidewalk up on the highway there.
No, I'm not asking for up on the highway. I'm just kind of bringing up more of a point as we go forward with these things, as you have it planned out to have connectivity commercially, and then it changes over to residential. In this case, the other side's residential, but in other cases, that isn't the case, and we're looking to try to make the city as livable as possible. And a lot of times developers, et cetera, are looking for good options to bring in property residential, and the planning's done with the parks, et cetera, to have that, well, what's the word I'm looking for, but pedestrian access. So I just think that we should definitely keep that in the front of our minds for the livability of people that are there already and the people coming in. So, more of a statement than a question, I guess.
Okay, we'll move on to applicant presentation. Give us your name and your address.
I'm Ron. I'm Ron Kincaid, pastor of Portland Community Church, 7100 Southwest Shoals Ferry Road in Portland. I started the church about 8 years ago, and about 2 years ago I invited one of our board members to preach. I don't do that very often, but he said okay, and he surprised me in the middle of his presentation, offering to match, trying to get more people to give to the church, offering to match any gifts in 2017. So then he gave, and a part of his gift was giving us this 2.47 acre parcel on McCormick Drive. He's the owner of Avamere, so there's an Avamere directly adjacent to it, and it was part of that property. And he had a buyer under contract to put in storage units, and then they did their feasibility and backed away. Then our broker, Tom Shimoto, found another buyer also to put in storage units, and they did their feasibility and backed away. At that point, Tom said to me, Ron, I don't think you can find a commercial buyer for this property. It's too big of a slant, can't be seen from Highway 26. If you can get this rezoned residential, we have a far better chance of doing that. So we began making the steps towards this, and you'll hear the presentations. And so Tom found another buyer for us to put in, whatever you call it, apartments, I'll just say. And they just backed out 2 weeks ago, and after doing their feasibility study. But we still strongly believe that's the only way we can sell it. We as a church really do need the sale of the property we've actually been pretty tight financially because we are anticipating this gift and have been unable to sell. So if you could approve the change to residential, we think we could have some new people here in Sandy.
Hi, I'm Carl Sonnenberg. I like this podium, it makes me feel tall. I have to lean over. As Kelly had alluded, I'm an architect. I've been through a few processes of trying to get residential land changed to commercial. And when Ron and Tom told me to help do it the other way, I had to ask a lot of questions. I hadn't actually seen the property. I came out and I totally understood it. It's on the inside of a curve. You'd have to look down while you're doing a curve, and then, oh, I see a store I want to go to. Oh, I can't get to it because ODOT wouldn't allow access. You'd have to go down to either street at the end, either around Avamere or around the church and the restaurant, and find your way back in there. So some other points. We just thought, I did an original pre-app meeting, I did some sketches kind of based on the apartments down the street, across the street and to the east. I think it's temporary housing for farm workers, and it seemed to fit. You could terrace those uses up the hill, whereas commercial uses often have a bigger floor plate, bigger parking lots, and it seemed like it'd be harder to terrace up the hill. In the meantime, what Ron didn't mention, besides the two mini storage uses, there were other inquiries saying that if they could have, if it was zoned residential, we might be interested. It does have adequate services, of course, for either commercial or residential. There's actually a reduction in traffic in the area, which is the first time I've ever come before a group like this saying we're going to reduce traffic. And then as far as the staff recommendations with with a buffer, we have no problem with that. It would probably make a better development anyway. One of the comments was about pedestrian connectivity. I think this gentleman did that. There are already sidewalks along the frontage of Avamere on both McCormick and US 26, so our presumption is that those would be extended. The Highway 26 side are back and they're kind of meandering, so you wouldn't want to be right next to the curb walking along there. There was one comment from a citizen, Miss Bromsby, I think that's how you pronounce her name. Her comment was like, gee, it's a really pretty site, be a nice park. We'd agree with that, we'd sell it to the city. But I do think, in respect to what her comments were, I think a residential use could fit in there a lot better and preserve more of the trees than a commercial, again, because of the big floor plates that those buildings often want. So with that, we did have a land use consultant, Chris Hagerman with the Bookin Group, who will talk about the issue Emily talked about with the surplus of land.
Hi, my name is Chris Hagerman. I'm with the Booking Group. We're land use consultants. Wanted to thank everybody being here tonight.
Address.
Address, 1140 Southwest 11th, Suite 500, Portland, Oregon, 97205. Staff has been very helpful and informative throughout this process. We appreciate that. We always like to tell planning commissions that we love the folks that they have working for them. We are supportive of this proposal and recommend approval to the City Council. This proposal is consistent with the statewide planning goals and Sandy's comprehensive plan goals. In particular, I think the question of economic development, goal number 9, is while you are reducing your buffer, the criteria that we're looking at, that you're evaluating, are you continuing to meet the goals? And in this case, you are. You have a buffer. You're going to continue to have a buffer. The buffer is reduced. But in terms of looking at the criteria, you're meeting them. As just was discussed, commercial along Highway 26 in this particular site is particularly untenable. Apartments can present much of that good face for the east end of Sandy that the comp plan's goals are looking for. You can have buildings that start to orient towards 26 in some ways with some entrances out that way. Your pedestrian connectivity is going to be increased by development in the period as opposed to no development, which is the current situation. And I think it's probably safe to say that multifamily development is going to have a better pedestrian connectivity system than potentially some of the large format commercial properties that could go in just allowed by right within this zoning. Let's see, clearly services are met and adequate for this location, so the zone change is easy to support. There's a need to develop land close to town to preserve, of course, your properties on the outsides of town. And the transportation study has demonstrated that this would present a great reduction in potential trip generation than commercial development, which would be allowed by right. And since we know that all of that traffic would come out on the local service street adjacent to the R1 zoning, reducing that traffic load is a desirable outcome, I would think, for those neighbors. We're in a metro-wide, if not a statewide, housing crisis, so getting some multifamily housing in locations close to existing infrastructure, close to the town center, is a desirable outcome for everybody. And ultimately, to the local neighbors' concern, tree protection is probably going to be more greatly achieved with multifamily development, as was previously described, than with much of the commercial development, which would require a much larger floor-plate and much larger commercial parking. So we encourage you to approve this, or recommend approval for this to the City Council, and we're available for any further questions or discussion you might have. Thanks.
Okay. That the end? Anybody else? Okay, thank you. No. All right, we'll move to proponent testimony. If you're in favor of the application, would like to speak. Okay, opponent testimony. If you're not in favor, I would like to speak. Your name and your address. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Nancy Raschke, and my address is 39965 Davis Street. I am exactly directly across on Davis from where this is being proposed. Quite frankly, you guys will be taking my view of Highway 26, so when I know when it's backed up to take the back way. I don't know if you guys all know what it comes like in there. My main concern is, I don't know how many of you have traveled Wolf Street during the daytime or McCormick. Coming up to Highway 26 is a mess. You get backed up on Wolf Street, you're gonna be backed up around the corner and get through. It takes like sometimes 2 light changes to get through that light. We've already got a set of 6 townhouses that are now being built across from the post office. They're not done yet, so they're not filled. When that traffic comes, where are those people gonna get out at? Wolf Street. Can't get out on Langen Sands safely. I'm just concerned with what is gonna happen. If you put multi-houses in there, or duplexes, apartments, I'm not sure what, it's more traffic. Even if you put it so that people can get onto the property from 26, they cannot get out from 26. They're still gonna have to come out on Langen Sand or on Wolf. Our traffic is gonna be horrible there, worse than it is now. I just wanna know what's gonna be done if that happens and it's approved. And please don't take my view. Okay, thank you for listening.
Thank you for coming. Anybody else? Okay. Recap? Anything?
Did we do neutral testimony?
Well, yeah, I kind of,
That was anybody else, right?
yeah, process of elimination. Go ahead. Any
I don't think
particular-
I have anything more to add.
Okay. You'd have opportunity for rebuttal to respond to testimony if you want.
Totally respect your opinion there. It will actually be, what could be built there would have a higher generation of traffic, as has been pointed out. So we're actually, I guess, less than that. So I want to point that out. I don't know what her view is, but you know, again, I think a residential use would be better, good, you know, well done is more likely to be, you know, a good neighbor for the single-family houses than the mini storage or those kind of things that might, you know, received proposals for. The other thing I just want to note, I meant to mention it earlier, but it's related, is that there is transit, both SAM or Sandy area metro transit lines pass through here, so I think it would make a great place for apartments where they can catch the bus or take, walk downtown and get services there. So that's all I really wanted to say.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, to add on the traffic, I think it's interesting when you have that out there, that if it was a commercial development going in, and it met all the right criteria, it wouldn't even come before us.
Yeah.
And most commercial developments have a higher trip count coming through, so the traffic would actually be up as opposed to residential. I think it's the summary on it. Doesn't seem right, or seem to make sense.
Logically,
but
yeah, right.
that's the net result, so.
Yeah, I'll agree with that. And at this point, it's just the zoning, not any specific development on the property, so, something will be built there, cause it's in the city and planned for urban development, so, yeah, it would be a down zone, I agree with the applicant on that front, so. And I'll also add, it does seem hard to serve, just cause access to ODOT would be difficult, if not impossible, and then all of your traffic would come out on McCormick, which then you have commercial next to R1, and it's kind of a tough site, so. Those are my 2 cents.
Is this discussion right now?
Yeah, yep, we can discuss, we'll close it in a bit.
Yeah, I
Just
guess I was
remind me to
deliberating.
close it.
You're deliberating.
I was just gonna say, I'm familiar with the site, and I can see why it makes sense, that it wouldn't be likely to be developed commercially, other than something like storage units, which wouldn't be very nice for the people in the R1.
Right.
I really I sat on the transit committee, and I really like the fact that it would be easily accessible by the transit lines that we're setting up. And so much of our new development is not transit accessible. So, in that way, in terms of housing, I think it's nice. And it's a nice buffer to the R1 for issues, so.
I haven't done the math to see what the potential units could be going in there. My one, as being a resident, would be more of the off-street parking. But since the what's the one out on Vista Loop that was put in, the gentleman referred to?
Oh, yeah.
Doug for apartments?
Is that what they're called?
Oh, really?
Oh,
Okay.
yeah, I know. what
Vista.
you're talking about.
We've
Oh,
No.
Vista View Apartments?
Vista View Apartments.
Yeah, sorry.
We've
Sandy Vista.
From that, after that was put in, the parking requirements for R2 have gone up on site, so, because there's definitely a huge overflow up in that region on Don Street, so I think that's been somewhat mitigated from the past.
Yeah, that was approved right before I worked here, so I don't know, you might have better remembrance on it, but I don't know if that got any variances to the parking standards. I don't even know the history on it.
We changed the parking requirements per number of bedrooms, et cetera, and changed the calculations that up the number of required spots after that and those were in there before Jerry and I were here. But again, the number of spaces per unit were increased to try to offset that off-street parking.
You know, one thing, there's 8 to 14 apartments.
You have to come up.
You'll have to come up. We're actually in our deliberations now,
Trying to
but
be helpful,
we
but
will let you.
there seemed to be a question on how many units. There would be 18 to 14 per acre, so it'd be 20 to 35.
Okay.
So I'm just trying to be helpful.
All right, thanks.
you.
That's why we keep it open. Any concerns or discussion on the planning goals, the zoning district amendment chapter, and comprehensive plan. Any of those issues, any issues or concerns on the surplus issue?
I think the bigger issue is gonna be when these other applications come in, right? At least this leaves us with a surplus.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
Any
it's-
future,
Well, it's a totally different level of financial, I mean, this is not $500,000 homes.
Right.
That are gonna be unaffordable for a lot of people. So it adds for more diversity of housing.
Chair, I have to go through this process in my head when I read this one, and I'll walk you through it really fast so you can get where I'm going. But when I first looked at it, I was like, I don't agree with it. I think it needs to stay commercial. It's built for commercial. But I know the property very well too, and as somebody that's done a lot of retail in my life, it doesn't have a good sensibility for retail on the floor of it. But then I thought about the C2 rule change that we just talked about recently, allowing for residential above and around it. And I said, well, now that really gives us the opportunity to build something there that has dual purpose. It keeps commercial zoning and it allows residential to fill the space, and I think it would kind of fit very well. But then I had the big what-if question. If we leave it commercial, it doesn't mean they have to build residential there. It could just end up being a big storage unit. And so you're left with this traffic scenario. And then to the resident that made the comment about the view, we lose the view no matter what's built there. Something's gonna be built there and it's gonna lose the view. So while I feel for that, that's just the reality of what it becomes. So you try to make the best decision to allow the residents to keep the traffic, which we heard in the last commission meeting. That's a big factor. We can only do what the code allows us to do or what we should do. And in this case, I do truly believe that allowing the multifamily homes will reduce the traffic in that area versus putting a commercial building there. I really do believe that it will be a benefit. I know it doesn't seem like that because it's counterintuitive when you think of the number of units that will be there, but it will provide less traffic than it would commercial. So that's kind of the staging I went through. The last thing to going to an R2, the only thing that concerns me is the walkability of that site from 26. And as I think about 10 years down the road, as I think about the expansion out of the city limits, and as things go further out, what is that area gonna look like, and is it gonna be accessible? And I just don't think with the slope of that land, we're gonna have retail frontage stores on 26. So it just, to me, it just led me down the path of saying, I agree with making the change from a C2 to an R2.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry for that long story.
No.
No,
No,
I had a similar.
Actually-
I wanted to go
thought
through
in
the
terms of
steps
not
with
wanting
you.
to
It
give up
helps.
commercial.
And put it on the
Yeah.
record.
Uh-huh.
it definitely helps.
I think also the transition between the church and Avamere, all right, and that a traditional commercial development going in there would be kind of an island. And again, accessibility to that island. The R2 seems to be a better fit. I don't think the church is going anywhere. Avamere is not going anywhere. So.
Mhm. I had thought about, or wondered about the potential domino effect, because looking at the property to the west, so what's gonna happen, why, but then I see this, that we're right now, if we send this on and it is approved by city council, we'd only have a surplus of commercial of 1.1, which probably, well, it's very small. I'm guessing that the property next to it's bigger than that. So are we, and I'm also assuming that we couldn't drop below our surplus.
That's
I
to
don't
be
think I
determined.
know. I think GLCD would have to.
Oh,
weigh-
David?
That's
would
what
weigh in.
I mean,
Yeah, I can speak to that. You ultimately can't. I mean, not in this context. There's certainly times where, as part of a, review of like the city did in 2015, culminating in ultimately the UGB expansion. You'll take a periodic look, or there's technically periodic review through the state, where, decisions over time, growth that happens over time, you may find yourself in a surplus, in a deficit. And that's a trigger necessarily to say, okay, you have to take action at that point, and generally it's have we maximize efficiency within the UGB, meaning are there changes we can make to either go from a different designation to commercial in this case, different zoning changes you could make, or more commonly, especially in cities the size of Sandy, most cities in Oregon, that's a clue to be expanding the UGB, and then you need to go through that process. So the general approach is that you certainly need to stay at. You shouldn't be bringing yourself into deficit, and that would be an avenue for DLCD to say, hey, you're out of compliance and you can take responsive action. And most likely it wouldn't be in cases like this that they'd say, sure, now you can look at expanding your UGB. They'd very likely be making the city look to convert land that's in a surplus to a commercial designation with the proper justification, of course. So what is all this gobbledygook I'm talking about? I think it's very important for you for the city to maintain, to not go below, to not have a deficit. That's number one. The surpluses you do have in commercial are over a 20-year horizon. Barely 3 acres, by no means large. That doesn't mean that you can't make the decision that's being asked of you tonight. You absolutely could legally, but I think the thing I wanted to point out is that it will anything you do when you have surpluses, for a period of time, we're not that far into that 20-year period. It's going to affect how you approach this issue in the future. Typically we like to see if there's going to be changes like this, that you're going from, a designation that has more of a surplus to one that has less. So you're trying to kind of make up that balance a little bit. And so I think, there's nothing that prohibits you, assuming you find, the other relevant criteria met, from bringing the surplus down even further. But you do need to, you can't go into a deficit, and you just should be thinking about, okay, from maybe a little bit of a longer term perspective, once if we get closer to that zero figure, the city's going to have to be thinking about, most likely not going into a deficit, not by expanding the UGB, but by redesignating lands already within the UGB. So with surpluses at this level, it makes future decisions. Your options are more limited when it comes to future decisions. I guess that's the way I would put it.
Thank you, because that's my conclusion of your comments is that we won't see a rash of requests for rezoning C2.
I think you will, actually.
Really? Even
Yeah.
though we'll be at 1.1 acres away from it?
Now, whether those requests are legitimate or can be approved is a different story, but I think you will
Right.
see a few people come through with zone change requests to go from a commercial zone to residential in the near future.
Okay.
And whether that happens or not, that's not something that at this point is speculative, and so whether that happens, in the next few months or even over the course, I guess maybe I'm thinking, more broadly, even in 5 years, 10 years, absent another look at the UGB, and maybe the city does that, but it may not and, you know, just those numbers over time, you know, will shrink. So, I think it's just a matter of being, you know, aware that, when you take, like I said, when you're talking about numbers, you know, sort of this tight early on in the planning horizon, it's very likely that, you know, as you get down the road a few years, that, you know, there's gonna have to be some decisions made about how to make sure that, you know, the city does maintain a sufficient, sufficient opportunities for commercial uses and commercial land.
Mhm.
So David or Kelly or any one of you, so down the road, let's say if somebody came through it again, wanted to do another reduction on that, are you saying that, I mean, we basically can't go negative, or we really shouldn't? Because what does that trigger again? I think maybe you just said it, but.
Yeah, I mean, let's just, you know, play out just simple numbers, you know,
Yeah.
if you were down to 1 acre, and then somebody were to come in and say, you know, I have 3 acres here that are zoned commercial, or designated commercial, and I'd like to take those and put them into a residential category, let's say.
Mm-hmm.
At that point, you'd be looking at either denying that request or saying, well, we can do that, but we're going to now need to figure out where we can make up 2 acres worth of commercial land, because that would be our ultimate deficit. So it makes that it doesn't mean per se you couldn't approve that request, but now you're looking to figure out, well, we know if we approve it, we're going to be in a deficit. How do we make that up?
So we have to make it up as the law states now, I guess.
Yeah, I mean,
Eventually.
state law requires you to be in a balance, you know, as ever. I mean, I don't know that the state's going to be, you know, writing letters and calling, you know, the powers that be the next day.
Right.
But technically, yes, they would have an ability to, you know, through various means to say, you know, Sandy, you're in a deficit, you're early into your, you know, planning horizon, you need to figure out how to make that up.
In my thinking, for the next one that would run us into deficit, it triggers a lot of work.
Right.
It's not, it won't be just a simple,
Who-
yeah, we've reduced it. It's gonna be a lot of work on.
Who decided the formula on the ratio of zoning? You know what I'm saying, the pieces, what was commercial, what's residential,
And
and
how
all
much
those
we
pieces.
need.
How much we
It's,
need,
it's,
yeah.
all, it's all based on projections. So the
So is it city
residential is
projection?
based on population projections, and the commercial is based on employment forecasts. So
But that's a city or a state.
no, so when we did ours, we used the safe harbor approach.
Mm-hmm.
So we used the development, or we used the growth rate that was already adopted by the Clackamas County for the city of Sandy.
Okay,
So we used the safe harbor, so we just went with that growth rate.
okay.
To do anything other than that, you'd probably have to pull in like an economist and spend a lot of money basically speculating on how much employment growth you'll have, and then it's still all speculative, right? No
It
matter
is.
who's actually doing the analysis.
Well, because Sandy's probably much different than Clackamas.
Sandy's
Well,
definitely
it's county.
different than like Wilsonville or something like
Right.
that, where you have a lot more employment growth occurring on a
Right.
yearly basis.
Right.
It was the growth rate that the county developed for Sandy.
Okay. And
Given
it
Sandy's situation.
Chair, I have a quick question,
Uh-huh.
more educational for me. When David said you have to make it up, so using the scenario, you bring this down to 1 acre, somebody comes in with 3 acres, and you're gonna be a deficit of 2 acres, you either deny it or you make it up. What is you make it up? How would we make that up? Because
Well, you would have to find some property that can be rezoned to commercial to then
That's what I was thinking.
bring your
Yeah.
surplus up above the 0 line.
all right,
And
I was just.
that's not easy.
Right, that's what I was thinking. That's why I just wanna make sure in my mind, I was thinking the same way.
And the state's not gonna look at it necessarily as, and that only happens if someone's willing. Because, you know, I mean, no cities like to do this, but the reality is you can designate property for, you know, a given, category of land use, you know, as long as it's justifiable and is otherwise lawful in any way the city wants. So it's not contingent upon necessarily, and someone being willing, you know, to change that designation. In reality, that, you know, and again, if this is not, I don't mean to suggest that, you know, you're an acre or two in deficit and you know, guys in trench coats from Salem are going to be coming to the city saying, you know, you must find land to change here. But the reality is that it wouldn't be just predicated on, you know, someone being willing to do that as well. If you'd have to, you know, make a hard decision, the city would, about, okay, well, we think for these reasons, maybe much like tonight, where you're looking at the development potential and the development realities of a site, there would be some other one out there that's right now zoned residential that, you know, reasonably we would look at and say, yeah, this is much more likely to, you know, develop in a you know, for commercial uses, or at least would stand a good chance of doing so. And, you know, take that action at that point.
Mm-hmm. That's all good background for our next decision, not this one.
Yeah, let's go to
It's
this one.
helpful. Anybody, are you ready to, and I'll say this to the audience, most of y'all understand that, some of you may not. Our role tonight as the Planning Commission is not to make a decision. The decision on this application is made by City Council, but the first step is for it to come to the Planning Commission, and then we forward a recommendation, either approve, deny, approve with these conditions, or, you know, our suggestions, our thoughts, our ideas. So there will be another opportunity for this application before City Council, and it'll be another public hearing just like this, so the public will have opportunity to give testimony as well. And then City Council will be making the decision. So we didn't close yet, did we?
No.
Okay, let's go ahead and do that.
Move to close the public hearing.
I'll second it.
Been moved and seconded. Did you get them? Who?
McLean, Wenzel, and Main.
Yes. To close the public hearing at 8:09. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? I didn't think so. Okay. I think we're leaning towards, it sounds like it, sending it on to City Council. My question would be, are there any caveats or things that anybody wants to add other than as is?
Sure, I'll put one more on the record. And I've heard I'm concerned about the surplus dropping in that area too. However, I go back to the land itself. I'm very familiar with it. I don't think it's ever gonna be anything other than what somebody's proposing tonight. And we have the surplus today to give, so I'm a for giving it a change.
Mm-hmm.
Mine is a little bit different from the fact of we're gonna be facing it with 3 acres. It's gonna be, and from what indications are from staff, we're gonna be there sooner than later. So, you know, if we had 50 acres, it'd be different. In terms of surplus, we're down to 3. We're gonna face this issue somewhere else. I'm looking again, going back to the livability for people that are existing residents. What would you rather look across the street at? Mini storage? Or, you know, I don't think it's a great commercial site, that we've gone over that. So I'm in favor of more for the livability of the people that are there, looking across the street at apartments as opposed to a mini storage. I mean, I think I'm saying the same thing as you are, Commissioner Mairin. The site itself has some topography issues.
Challenges, right?
That make it very challenging. So anyway, but I think that, I don't know what's coming down the road. Maybe there's some other better uses, but this looks, for the people that are there, I think, in my opinion, it's a better use better use for them to
Mhm.
use those 2 acres.
Okay. Any, is there agreement on the, I think I know, on the recommendation about the buffer on 26? Any concerns on that? That we would be forwarding that to city
that's
council?
fair.
Recommend that, yeah.
Yeah, to recommend, they require to maintain.
As staff recommended in the
Yeah.
report,
Yes.
to keep it there, right?
Yep. Okay, well, I think we can take a motion to forward it on to city council with our
Go ahead.
approval.
I'm on a roll, so I'll go with it. So Chair, I'll make a motion to move proposal 19-037 McCormick Drive zone change to city council with approval.
I'll second.
Okay, and I assume, as in the staff report, which would include the buffer.
Correct.
Okay. Been moved and seconded to forward to city council the recommendation as in the staff report on the zone change. Take a roll call vote.
Okay. Commissioner Wasowski,
Yes.
Commissioner McLean-Wenzel,
Yes.
Commissioner Logan,
Yes.
Commissioner Mobley,
Yes.
Commissioner Mayton,
Yes.
and Chairman Crosby.
Yes. Okay, motion approved. Do we know the date that it would go to city council?
March 16th.
16? March 16.
Really soon.
7 p.m.
Yes, 7 p.m. Chambers here, as far as I know.
Yeah, same room.
And I would add, and I guess I could have done it earlier, but as far as what eventually gets built there and those specific traffic impacts and what that looks like are question for the next round of applications, but I'll take that opportunity to make the plug for the transportation system plan update that's about to start. So the best public involvement is when the rules are set, not when we're trying to enforce them, so keep an eye out for the TSP update. I'd encourage some public involvement there for sure.
All right. You want to keep moving, or do you want to break now? Keep moving? All right.
Can you give us like 5 minutes? Because Emily's gonna have to type minutes for a little bit. I'm gonna have to take the computer, actually, so it'd be really nice to have like just a 5
Okay,
minute.
no, that's fine.
Okay.
Not a problem at all.
Thank you.
So the point I was having a really hard time articulating was, seems to be such a higher demand for residential than commercial, which is why these developers want to build these apartments above, right? And we put too many restrictions on it, just.
Actually, I can just say.
We absolutely, you know, they've already got some developments in other places that are associated with
Can
it.
Right, I never thought about that.
Okay, yeah, that's
I
fine.
think the thing that's gonna screw that one.
We have
up
this ratio we have to
is-
stick with, but
This is going from my experience.
Sandy
What?
doesn't have that demand, at least today.
Yeah.
Oh,
It
it's
might
an
be 20
awful
years,
site
but
for
right now,
you.
everybody wants.
I mean, it's a hard site. It's a hard site.
Going to mow the trees
I've seen
down,
that a lot of other
seriously.
places too,
And-
especially
and
when
move some dirt around.
the residential
make-
market is hot and the
Yeah.
economy's
Yeah.
good and
I mean, just being,
people
Yeah.
and then replant.
seek
So
to rezone stuff
that,
Beautiful trees.
pretty recently
Yeah.
set
but again,
to just
if-
like a
But that's
residential use
really
for a
hard
single
place,
family
'cause
that
that
sells.
red shed or
'cause they
whatever
could
it is, that
develop
place
Trying to
just
predict
keeps
20
turning
years
over.
out
I mean,
on
I'm glad
any-
the guy that's
Yeah.
there is making it go
Right.
now, but that's so hard to get off the road there.
Perfect for that
26.
C2 where it has commercial on the front.
I just
with
can't imagine
residential above
commercial
it,
doing well
And then
there.
apartments behind
Right.
it, so they get the residential looking at residential.
I mean,
You got
yeah.
commercial looking at.
I mean, there's
levels of
already,
walkability,
there's
but
empty
it's a
lots
big what if
that
scenario.
sat
You
here
can't-
for a long
Right,
time.
and a lot of
it's not-
parking
There's
goes in the
lots of
back.
developments
Right.
downtown
And
that
it would've
seem
been
like
perfect.
they've
It's
been,
not.
they've got slower
It's
traffic.
the land.
They feel like, they
Hey,
seem like
Jerry,
they'd be
just to remind you that it's
developed
legislative
first.
on your
as a
sheet.
walkability.
Oh,
you
actually,
want to the developers.
legislative is the same as it was judicial. I know, except,
C2 and C2.
I think I skipped the
Oh.
And then they give-
opening ones about abstentions and conflicts and challenges.
Gotcha.
I know, that's.
Ha 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 ha.
Change that.
Which
They
one's
put it
that?
in.
That's the
They're
middle
just
one.
gonna gravitate, just like rock.
Callum.
It's always gonna compare what gets important.
Yeah, the first one.
I was trying to find a way to comment on that.
That's where whoever meets the road, man.
I thought so.
Agenda items, it's typical business item, or we going to come out and those plans.
I thought you were perfect, 'cause it's like you're.
I'm assuming, but I don't know.
Gotta get rid of that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
We just have to live by what the book says. Doesn't define us.
This,
I can't.
Is there a short somewhere?
yeah. This was a problem last time too. This has a short. Does tech know that?
I think so.
I'm over here slamming on it in the middle of session.
I read that thing on Facebook.
I got down underneath it last time and
Started with a
tried
couple
and
comments, then it was
plugged
like
everything
100
over again and
comments.
it's just, I
I
think
live in
it's
that-
this.
I
I
live
think
in that
it's
sort of
in the,
neighborhood.
cause
Yeah.
it's not underneath.
I did, I read it. It is different. Slightly different. Okay, we ready?
Yeah.
All right, it is 8:18, and I will open our third public hearing. This is the fun one. This is file 19-043, proposed code changes. And I'll call for any abstentions from the planning commission. Nothing, or any conflict of interest. Believe it or not, my script is a little bit different, and this is legislative, so there are no call for ex parte. Any challenges to the jurisdiction of the planning body? Boy, we got small. Or any individual member? Okay, if you testify, you must raise all issues at this hearing. Your comment should state why the legislative amendment should or should not be approved, or include proposed modifications you believe are necessary for approval according to the standards. If you do not raise specific issues at the final evidentiary hearing or by close of the record, or fail to provide statements or evidence to allow the local government or its designee to respond to the issue, you will not be able to appeal the decision to the Land Use Board of Appeals based on that particular issue. Failure of the applicant, which in this case is the city, to raise...
Jerry, I'm sorry to interrupt you. You don't need to read this one for the legislative amendment. That's just for the quasi-judicial.
Oh, but I'm on the side that says legislative order of conduct.
Oh, well, we'll have to clean that up. Sorry
Okay,
about that.
I wondered about that. It does have some changes, but the next thing is staff report.
Okay. So this is something I've been looking forward to doing, probably almost the whole time I've worked here, is kind of reducing our parking requirements. If you read a lot about parking, which I know is not a fascinating subject, but I guess I'm a nerd for parking, but if you read a lot for parking, and similar to the video I sent out to you guys a few months ago from Professor Shoup,
Mm-hmm.
if you ever travel or go to different places, with the exception of like Disneyland or something like that, if you think about memorable places, many of them are not going to be parking heavy. They're more pedestrian scaled and oriented. And so one of the issues I think with our downtown currently is we've been requiring way too much parking. And it's something that I think plagues a lot of smaller towns, because you assume that everybody wants to drive everywhere. And it has some truth to it when it's subdivisions and when it's You know, if you live on the southern part of town and you need to drive into Portland for work or something like that. But really, any downtown, including small downtowns, any city you've been to that the downtown's flourishing, there's always a lot of pedestrian activity, and the parking, if there is a lot of parking, is usually kind of hidden behind the main street. So if you went to like Hood River or Sisters, just some local examples, but even if you go to some larger cities, even if there's not a tremendous transit system or it's not a very large city, the parking is still never the cent in front thing that you remember when you go on those trips. That's kind of, I think, one of the reasons why people romanticize Europe and different places in South America that have been designed similarly. So it's something that I really wanted to change, and just talking to people around town, everybody's been in support. I haven't talked to actually a single person yet that did not like the idea. As you'll see, in addition to the downtown parking changes, which I think is the biggest one that I'll go over in a second, but basically the downtown parking changes would eliminate the necessity to provide off-street parking when you're building commercial property. And so what that does is over time in cities like this, like Hood River, as you eliminate parking on individual lots, then the city through urban renewal would be obligated to build more public parking lots. But how urban renewal districts work is that if we do get a lot of increased development and that sites are maximized with buildings instead of parking lots, that actually increases your tax base, which you can then use that tax to actually build the parking lots. So it actually makes a lot of financial sense even for the urban renewal district. So that's one of the biggest changes. Let me just go to the next slide. I only have one slide really. Some of the other ones, these are kind of the big 6 bullet points, or kind of the 6 big changes that you'll see. There's also a lot of other reductions we did in parking requirements from multiple uses, as listed in section 179820 A8 through A11. I took a lot of the different types of uses and combined them into one another, and then in certain uses we did a reduction, so that instead of 1 space per 300 square feet, it's 1 space for 400 square feet. And so this would be applicable not just to downtown Sandy, but also to any commercial or industrial zone. So in the downtown with the new changes, you would not be required to put in parking for any new buildings. If you have an existing building and you want to have a more intensive use, it would still not be required. However, it does still allow a developer, if they want to put in off-street parking, to put in off-street in the downtown, and then it would fall under these regulations for size, space, and vehicle maneuvering area and driveways and everything else. In the C2, C3, and the industrial zones, you would still have to provide off-street parking, but it would be reduced from what it is currently right now with the changes that are being proposed. So that's the second bullet point. The elimination of required off-street parking for an ADU, that's just in compliance with House Bill 2001, so we have to adopt that. It's actually already in effect at the state level, so if somebody comes in with an ADU proposal right now, we wouldn't be able to require it anyways, so it's just kind of taking that outdated requirement out of our code. One of the other big things is clarification regarding driveway allowances and cul-de-sacs. So right now it's kind of vague and it's not spelled out very well on driveways. So we'd be doing a lot more specifics around cul-de-sacs and how wide you can put a driveway and how close you can put them to the bulb and the entry of the cul-de-sac. And that's laid out in a few of the diagrams that we had created. It's on page 11. So it shows a cul-de-sac, and then the 2 exhibits there basically show how far driveways need to be located from return a curb and different jargon. We're also looking at limiting the number of parking spaces that can back out of a parking court into the right-of-way to 2. We haven't had any of these really play out, but our Public Works Director, as explained in Exhibit H, is very concerned with how we had these set up in our code 5 or 6 years ago, and that it would be very difficult for pedestrians in these areas. It would also be very difficult for maintenance. He would also like to see most of the parking courts become privately owned and not public, so that we wouldn't have to be maintaining them. I think the Public Works Director is spot on it. If you want to propose a parking court, I think it does need to be privately maintained, because it is for the benefit of the new subdivision or residences that you're putting in. So it is kind of odd to have the burden on basically everybody in the city, or everybody that, all development that's contributing through gas tax or vehicle registration fees, to be paying for essentially private parking courts because somebody was trying to squeeze in density. So it is kind of an odd thing that we have in our code that we adopted, I think, in 2013, that we've thought about it some more, and we'd like to kind of change how we look at it. That being said, we do want to allow the distance from a front door on a house to the on-street parking space to go up from 200 to 400 feet. So we hope that even if Planning Commission and ultimately City Council make some changes to the parking court, and that the increased linear feet that a parking space could be from a front door of a residence would allow for some flexibility there. So it'd be some give and take, I think. Plus, our maximum block length without a pedestrian cut through is 400 feet. So we thought that's kind of what our code's setting up to be a reasonable walking distance. So we think that 400 feet would be fine as well for a parking spot. The other big thing that I didn't put on this slide, that one of the biggest things in this code change is if you flip to page 4, we're really looking at daycare facilities. And so right now we have been identified as a city with a daycare desert. I think we've been identified as one of the worst in the whole state of Oregon, and definitely in Clackamas County. And because of that, we're looking at changing the commercial daycare, how you would actually tabulate parking. So if you're in the C1, again, you wouldn't have to provide any off-street parking for a daycare facility. Outside of the C1, we would only require 2 parking spaces for the entire facility, plus 1 per employee on the largest shift. And what we're hoping is that it incentivizes daycare providers to locate places that right now there would be parking limitations. They're a use that's very heavy on like drop-off and pickup times, but really, besides the workers, there's no one else really parking there for any extended periods of time that we're aware of. So it would be kind of funky to have a high parking requirement for a use that probably doesn't need a high parking requirement. In addition to that, we just find that there's a lot of benefits to reducing parking, in addition to kind of what I was talking about at the beginning with kind of cities that you visit. The memorable ones don't have a ton of parking that you can see everywhere. There are huge savings for development. And so a lot of times what you'll see in, my dissertation a long time ago, 15 years ago or 12 years ago, whenever it was on this, is a lot of times when you see development sites with a lot of parking, is the revenue that is being generated, or the potential revenue that could be generated, is not being seen. Because if you can maximize that site and have more rentable area, then it would produce more income. And instead of paying for maintenance of parking lots, you're paying for maintenance of buildings where you're actually leasing space. So there's a lot of benefits for it. It also reduces stormwater runoff and heating of stormwater, especially if you put on green roofs above the building, which I know hasn't been happened very much in Sandy or at all yet, but I think it's going to be happening more in the future. You take away taxpayer burdens related to parking lots, and so on. So that's kind of some of the bigger picture things with this code. I'd be happy to discuss anything and go into great detail on anything we're proposing. We did, and probably part of the reason why you don't see more people in the audience is I'm taking a little bit of a different approach on development code changes from here out. We sent them out to some different firms, including All County Surveyors, Furwood Design, Cicel Engineering, Access Design, Coal Valley Partners, Tracy Bound Planning Consultants, and Robert Mosier Architect. And so these people are the ones that actually apply our parking code the most often that I kind of identified, so I sent it out to all those individuals. We did get comments back from multiple, including Coal Valley, Robert Mosier, All County Surveyors, and Deke Haycamp, the owner of Next Adventure. And if you look through their comments, they're there's a few concerns here or there, or a few suggestions, but by and large, most of what we're proposing was fully supported by all of those individuals. It was actually really interesting, if you look at Exhibit G by Mr. D.K. Camp, he's the owner of Next Adventure. He owns the Next Adventure site in Portland, the big one, and then all their other locations. I think his, for the downtown parking, is kind of a really good case study. And that's, if you look at his site, the site is small. He, I think, has 5 or 6 parking spaces down in there, and then everybody else parks on street. He had that older building that used to be Winter Fox, and then he put on the big expansion to the back. He wants to, I think in 2021, or maybe even the end of this year, apply, knock down the front building, and even put a larger building out there. One of the big limitations for him, without going through a whole bunch of variances, would be that there's no way he could meet muster, or meet the requirement for the parking. However, he feels with the existing 5 or 6 spaces plus his on-street, he feels it's plenty for his customer base. So I think what this parking code would allow is for developers or business owners like Mr. Haycamp to say, you know, I don't need that parking, you know, and then ultimately if he does, it's really on him to find more parking for his customers or employees. So, but I think in a lot of circumstances like his business, for example, I think he thinks that reducing the parking requirements would be good for development of his property. So with that, we did the required notification to DLCD, the legal notice in the Sandy Post, and seeked a lot of input. We took some of that input and made some changes to the code. Some of the other input we appreciated greatly, but as Mr. Walker, the Public Works Director, pointed out in his comments, that there's pretty good reasoning for why we're doing some of the changes. So we didn't feel all the input we were comfortable with suggesting or recommending, but we did truly appreciate all the input and all the different people that I reached out to going through our code and kind of giving us suggestions on things. So I think that's about all I have. If you guys have anything specific, we can flip to the pages.
Kelly, I have one, and talking to a couple of different people, it doesn't affect the commercial side, but people are confused, misinformed would be a better word, in terms of the getting rid of the parking requirements. They're associating that with the time zones, the 2-hour parking.
Oh yeah, it wouldn't have anything to do with
I know, but
on-street.
I'm just saying is for going out there, several people have come back and said, oh, so you can just stay and park, whatever. So, I'm not sure how to get that word out better, but that's what the initial response from.
Paper?
Huh?
Yeah, I think the
In the
paper would be a
paper?
good
Yeah.
place to have that. Yeah, I have not actually heard that once from anybody I've talked to. So I don't know if these are just like general public members, but the development community definitely understands the difference between the on-street and off-street. On-street and off-street. So yeah, all the 2-hour parking signs we just put in like 5 years ago, they would remain, and that would still be in effect.
So can you walk me through the parking courts? You know, I like all myself, the C1 and reducing even the C2. The parking courts that we put in, was it 2013?
I think it was, yeah.
Somewhere in that?
Yeah, it was, actually, if you look at the bottom of the page, it was this ordinance, so it was effective July 2013. That was the last time we changed this code chapter. And when we did change that code chapter, the parking courts were added at that time, 1798, 200.
Because we added that specifically because of the tightness of, or some of the density that was coming in, and people having 3-4 vehicles, and right?
Mm-hmm.
So we're not really reducing those requirements, are we?
No.
Okay, so.
So the only things to residential that staff's recommended for reductions are that ADUs wouldn't have off-street parking, which is required by the state. And we're eliminating, the only other thing really that we're doing is eliminating the requirement that if you have more than 2 bedrooms in an apartment dwelling, that you'd have to provide more parking. So what I've heard from multifamily developers is that they would love to put in more 3-bedroom multifamily units, but because we require the 2.25, it actually throws that all off, and then they end up going back to 2. And then what we hear from people relocating to town is we wish you had more 3-bedroom units.
Mhm.
So I'm just trying to find a happy medium of the parking would be almost the same requirement, but hopefully the developers would put in more 3-bedroom units for people moving to town. So those are the only changes happening to the residential that we're proposing.
So I'm just talking, if there was an R2, R3 in downtown, if there's residential downtown, then they're still gonna have to meet the number of bedroom calculations for, we're not like next to Max Line where you don't have to have any parking.
Yeah, no, I mean, the, if you go to page 6, so right now, it doesn't say this, but the recommendation is that residential uses in the central business district, so C1 and C3, may be reduced by 25%. So if you were to locate in the C1, you'd still have to put in your 2 spaces per 2-bedroom unit, but let's say you had 4 units, instead of 8 spaces, we would only require you to have 6 with this, if you wanted this reduction essentially. But yeah, we're not getting to the Portland method where you eliminate requirements for all residential, no.
Well, I just don't wanna go back to again why we put it in there, was the realities were people commuting out here having X number of vehicles and then a boat, et cetera, and, yeah.
So that your question around the parking courts is, if you go to that, it's on page 15 and 16. So the changes would actually allow for larger parking courts. We would allow 10 spaces instead of 8, but that's in cases where you pull off the street into like a parking lot essentially. So you do all your maneuvering on private property or on the subject site and not in the right of way. The Public Works Director's concern is that if you had 8 or 10 spaces, that's what is that, a 70, 80 foot curb cut? So you have no street trees that whole length, you have no street lighting, and then you have 70 or 80 feet where people are walking along on the sidewalk in a residential neighborhood, and you could have backing movements at any time. So it is kind of a potential safety issue, I think.
No, it is. The other one is, going along with that, is over on University, and I believe it's College
Yeah.
Street. There's a court there. I don't know if anybody's seen that. When we go through. It still hasn't all built out yet, and now I'm just looking at maybe you pull up on your
Yeah,
map and
I
take
might
a
be able
look
to
at
pull it up on a aerial here.
Yeah. But I'm just a little concerned on the sight distance. You guys familiar with why we put those in?
I'm not.
So we were going through and putting in these really tight developments. We increased the lot sizes, but you still ended up with parking curb cuts for driveways. And there was, from one to another, there wasn't enough room to really park a car. So they met the requirement of having 2 spaces per household, because they'd park on the apron or in the garage. But the garage would get filled up, so that part was gone. They park in front, and anyway, they ended up with just cars everywhere, or we did. So came back with, well, you have the 2 spots plus 1 on-street spot. All right? And if you couldn't provide that because of the curb cuts, et cetera, then you had to provide a court or a parking court within so many feet of the front doors. And I think, is that the basic summary, Kelly? Or
Yes.
Okay.
Sorry, I'm trying to bring up.
And let me just jump in here. We're getting a little bit ahead of ourselves, because we do need to offer public testimony from our vast
That's
audience.
right.
So if there's, and this one, my script is different, where there's not opponent or proponent. That's just public testimony. So if anybody here just has some comments that they would like to make about the proposed changes, for or against, or you just have a totally new idea that Kelly did not see, now is time to step to the podium. Okay, we're quiet, so we can go back to,
I apologize, Chairman.
no, that's okay.
Here's
And-
the parking court you were talking about.
And if you,
What street
if
is
you
that?
go to like the Portland maps, that's what it has, the designation for the lot lines, where, how they're laid out so tight and wide, anyway, it's just.
What's that for?
Could you talk a little bit about what that picture is?
Zoom out a little bit, can you?
I
Kelly?
can't, well, so it wouldn't even let me project, so I had to paste copy, so I think that's
Oh.
about all I can do.
Fields over here.
Let's see.
right north of it.
Oh, I guess I can zoom a little.
Oh, you
So that's a parking court. The proposed code changes would not eliminate that. What it would do is actually allow you to put 2 more spaces in there if you wanted to. The difference is right now that's actually now owned by the city of Sandy, and what we're proposing is that would be privately owned by a homeowners association essentially, or by an individual, I guess, if they wanted to. We just think it's kind of an odd burden to put these parking courts in really dense neighborhoods where it benefits basically the homeowners in this neighborhood, but then it's actually publicly owned and maintained by the city. It's really a weird setup.
Yeah.
So we'd be flipping it back. And I think the reason why it was done that way is so they wouldn't have to create a homeowners association with bylaws and everything for just a parking court. But I think if you're gonna propose something like this, I think that's kind of the luxury of getting it approved, is that then unfortunately you have to create a homeowner association to maintain it.
I'm supportive of making it public, I think that makes more sense. I was bringing up you can go to a site called Portland Maps and type in the address and you can see that, but that is, the 400, I guess I have 400 feet I have a little concern with, of where that can be put. I mean, that's a football field and a half away, and given the topography, I mean, that's,
It's a long way to carry your groceries.
yeah.
Is that only in the C1 or is that across the board?
That'd be anywhere that you wanna count on-street parking.
Okay.
So, just to reiterate though, the on-street parking is only required for residential development, and it's only required for, residential development that is not multifamily housing. So it'd be like single-family homes, duplexes, and row houses, that'd be about it.
Which would still have you wouldn't be carrying your groceries, cause you're probably living there and you have a spot in your driveway.
Or you might have to talk to the person that you live with, like, hey, park down the street when I have the groceries. Yeah, I don't know. I mean,
Right.
a lot of what we're seeing developed, single-family home-wise, has a 2-car garage, probably enough space in there for 1 realistically, and then most of them have a wide enough driveway for 2 additional
Right.
cars.
No, and
Row houses are a different story.
But this is, kind of duplex land, I mean, this was required.
Those are row houses right there, yeah.
So,
They appear like duplexes, but each house in that subdivision is on its own lot of record.
but using this as an example, then that parking court could be 400 feet from the furthest
The
door.
furthest house that you're counting, yeah, it could.
Yeah.
And that's the current length of your block now, you said?
400 feet, yeah.
And I'm just using that as kind of, maybe this is kind of a worst case, cause that, if you go to that site, you go down a hill and that's around, kind of, if Don was here, he'd say, why 400 feet, just a number.
I mean,
So-
it was taking,
Channel down now.
but it was taken directly because the block length was that.
Okay.
That's why I mirrored it.
You should have made it 400 feet 3 inches.
Or 405 feet or something, yeah.
Yeah.
No, we did look at that and what was a reasonable, because we've been asked by numerous people, could we look at exploring a larger distance? Developers. And so I looked at that and I thought, well, what's a reasonable distance to go above 200? And then we kind of said, well, 400 makes sense because the block length is that. So that's why it's that number.
Well, I was coming back to livability, this is down in the basin, that could have been put in the middle of the development
Yeah,
and had okay, so
yeah.
the 400 feet does let you get away with shoving it somewhere else more.
Further away.
If it's public, I could park there and walk to the football game.
It's not
Or watch the football game.
Anyway, I encourage you to go through and look at that, it's kind of interesting site.
So if a parking court was private, is there a requirement for private property? Is there a requirement for like a public use overlay or something to make it public, or is it just become
No,
private
just,
parking?
it would just be identified on the plat as a tract that's only used for parking essentially.
But would it be private? Could somebody restrict that?
I don't know, that's a good question.
Is that like if I were to go there and park, could I get ticketed?
Yeah, I mean, it would be commonly owned by, so how I would say it on the plat is tract, let's just call it tract A, is commonly owned by the 27 other lots, and that they had to maintain it per the recorded document. The recorded document would be like a maintenance agreement for this parking lot. So I think if the question is, could you go there and park and get ticketed or get towed? My
Assuming that
assumption-
you don't have any connection with any of the houses. If you were a guest of the house owner, I assume you could park there.
Yeah, it's private property, so I'm assuming they could tow you.
You won't get ticketed, but you will get towed.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, that's the way it is on the HOA today.
Right, that's,
You know, you have parking spots and somebody comes in with a RV and sets up camp.
Right.
I mean, you're gonna get,
that's any private parking lot you go to. They're gonna post their sign up, you're gonna pull in, you park at your own risk, they'll tow you if they want. So
Do you want to add anything to that, David?
As far as the enforcement piece goes?
Yeah.
If it's gonna be, ultimately private, that's gonna be not, well, I guess theoretically the city could get involved, but it wouldn't have any obligation to, and I wouldn't be recommending they do so. It's gonna be basically, a matter between the, the HOA that owns it or manages it, or, it'd be a private matter.
Thank you.
well, I'll just leave mine with, I think the 400 feet gets it shoved down the street even further, and if you're using it for accessibility to the units that you're putting in, trying to get something that helps the developer make it more central, I think could be instrumental to the people there, as opposed to.
Oh, I see, that's a new one.
Yeah, that's,
Dominate it.
Yeah.
No,
Well, Ron, I would add one more comment since you brought it up, and you made me start thinking about it. It's the 400 feet. You said something, and I'm trying to replay it back in my head. If we approve the 400, then they could conceivably build the whole block and then push that parking to one end of it. And today it's set at 200, so they'd have to split it in the middle. And if you say you went hypothetically to 300, they could push it out a little bit more, but they couldn't push it all the way to the end. So and you're just mirroring the 400 to mirror the block distance.
Exactly.
So I like the idea of going shorter only because it keeps the walk shorter and that's also safety in my mind, for public safety, somebody parking. But then I think about the way it's gonna look. And you have a parking lot in the middle of the block. Does that make sense? So I just ask to think about that, because that's what I'm thinking about.
You can put some nice trees around it, I mean, whatever, but I'm going through, if you have it, it's there for the people to use. And again, I wish you all could drive down and see that. I think it's a good idea. But going more than that distance from what it is, I think is, kind of defeats the purpose. And again, it gives an edge to the people that live close to it, and the other one, not,
Yeah,
but.
yeah, by going to a shorter distance, what you're saying, it more equals out the walking to your car, for the group of people that it's considered
That
their
live in that
off-street
area.
parking.
So then Kelly, can you answer this for me? If you change that 400 and keep it at 200, does that have any substantive impact to the other changes that you've made?
In the parking court section?
Right.
No.
Yeah.
Okay.
I was only doing it because I've been asked by people to look at increasing it.
Also, just from a safety standpoint, so much of the year here, it gets dark and, primarily women are nervous about walking very far in the dark.
That's what I was thinking of, just you're increasing it, you're putting somebody more at risk.
And using a block length of 400 and then do this 200, it's gonna kind of make it more central just by the numbers.
Yeah, and I agree, they can do vegetation around it, make it nice.
Yeah. I agree, I'm just thinking through what you said, Kelly, but being asked to make it longer. I'm sure those, I'm assuming those that are asking for it to be longer are the ones who would be building it. And by giving it longer, that gives you a bigger area where you can put it, and trying not to be too negative, but it opens up the possibility of using a lesser desirable spot to put it there, because you can go further. And I don't know, I kinda like what we're saying about equaling it out for the walking distance. I mean, if you think about it, if you had a party and you said, you can come, but you're gonna have to park 400 feet from my house. I mean, it's sad that we're afraid to walk 400 feet.
Yeah.
But,
I'm a father, I have 4 daughters. I'm thinking of my daughter parking a block away. She's 18 years old. She's walking up the street, and in Sandy, I'm not that worried about it for the most part, but in other areas, I would be a little more concerned, and so that's the thought I'm having. The other side of it, just to add one more thing in, is if contractors are asking to push it out, I'm thinking maybe they want a little more flexibility within the land that they have to place it, so maybe not going to 400, but maybe going to 250 or 300, even it keeps it relatively closer, gives a little more room for flexibility. But again, I'm not suggesting we do that, I'm just throwing another idea out there. It gives a little bit more movement for them, but it allows us to keep the public safety relatively close.
If you can, go to the aerial view of that area and see, I mean, that meets the 200 feet there. And I don't know if you had a chance to look, but it's a pretty good hike at 200 feet from the furthest doorstep. Which, anyway.
What's the address?
What kind of process would somebody have to go through if they wanted to make it forward, but the code says 2?
Well, that's a good
Variance?
question.
Special variance,
This is it.
or a planned development.
Oh, mm-hmm.
Those would be the 2
Oh my
avenues to
goodness, yeah.
increase it that much.
Yeah,
That-
and they could have put a house here.
Yes.
You could-
Thank you.
Parking
I didn't even think about that.
You could increase it by, so say the
Yeah.
standard's still at 200
I think
feet.
220.
You
Yeah.
could increase it by 40 feet with a type 2 adjustment, which would just be processed by staff. And unless there's like a really odd reason, we'd probably grant it
Right,
typically. I mean,
yeah,
to get
it
the
could have been
initial
right
approval.
here and make that a house.
Or they could submit a special variance request then.
And come before you,
Right.
you folks, yeah.
And how often does
If you
this
saw,
happen?
if you came over and saw what he's got on his, I
Remember, I
don't
mean,
know how
I
to,
don't know.
but it's
Every
actually,
7
it's really
years.
helpful. It's where this one is
would
that
leave
you're
it with the
showing, but it's a larger
Yeah.
picture.
Go
So,
case by
if,
case,
so,
that's it.
so this is where they put the parking,
And this is the furthest house.
and they could have put the parking structure there and put a house there.
Yep.
It just
400
would
you're
be a
out to here.
flip, and it would be easier for the people, safer for the people living there.
So we only have 2 developments right now with, parking
Thank you.
courts. It's this development, and then Tickle Creek Terrace has like 3 of them. That little development right by the Tickle Creek Trailhead on the east side with,
Yeah.
that's really jammed in. That's why they have 3 of them, because they didn't really have a lot of on-street parking, and you couldn't park on DeBarco. So those are the only 2 developments with parking courts currently. We do have several development proposals that are including parking courts. So, now whether they will actually go forward or not, I don't know. But
Well, in general, I'm really happy to see the parking changes you're proposing. I agree. When I was on the Main Street Committee and we went and looked at other cities, cities like McMinnville, Cannon Beach, a lot of the cities that are walkable and very pleasant to walk around in, they have a parking area that's off the main street, off and away. And you do have to walk a couple blocks to get to the main street, but people do it and it makes it nicer.
Yeah, I agree. And we've got a good start at some public lots in downtown that are underutilized. But a lot of those, like
Parking.
Grants Pass, we were in last year, I was kinda surprised they have a really nice downtown, but they have a really good network of publicly owned lots, so you park there and you can walk a block or two, but.
Yeah, people are usually probably aren't, they're more open to walking a block or two in a commercial area if you go to a store or so forth, but carrying your groceries
It's that,
or
yeah,
to
that,
your
that
house,
residential one makes it
it's
more
a- it's a-
difficult.
Agreed, yeah.
We have a different mentality when we are walking to our house. We want to step out, open our car door and step into our living room.
Right.
Not that that's really healthy.
I think the one thing we're always faced with here is, I go through in McMinnville, beautiful downtown, et cetera, going through, until you said Grants Pass, I'm like, who has like a traffic count like we do? Okay, and I don't know what it is at Grants Pass, but that's always, the hard thing here is, we wanna make it livable and workable, but we still got tens of thousands of cars a day. It's, you know, it's balancing that safety with the walkability, and I don't have an answer to
I
it.
mean, I would say like, probably until very recently, my assumption, Todd would know more about this than me,
Yeah.
but my assumption is like Dundee and Newburgh probably had higher traffic counts at least than we do, or as high. I think higher probably though. And I think their downtowns are moving in the right direction of doing that.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're right. There's not a lot of good examples of
Yeah.
smaller towns with the traffic like we have, yeah.
Well, in Newburgh downtown, which is great, it's much more expansive, it's so
It
much
is.
wider than
Yeah.
our downtown.
Right,
core.
right.
It is,
You
yeah, it's
know.
much bigger.
Redmond was like that, but the reroute, it took a bunch of traffic.
And now it's way nicer and more
Yeah.
vibrant
It
than it
is,
was, yeah.
totally, yeah.
Mhm. Yep.
And
Okay,
even,
other,
like Sisters doesn't have, they don't have the traffic volumes
No.
like Sandy
Right.
at all.
yeah.
No.
People
But
in
they do have
Sisters
big
think they do,
lots
but they
off.
don't.
They have the demand, just.
Yeah. It's not a trucking route like Highway 26 is though.
Okay, well, I think, are we ready to move it on? And is there a consensus that we would, our preference would be to maintain the 200 feet?
Yeah.
I would.
I would rather keep it 200.
Why don't we, I have a little flexibility, 250, just to give a little flexibility, or no?
I
Well,
think,
staff-
I think
staff
when he explained
can-
this, he said that
Okay.
if we do 200, they can do a type 1 variance and make it 240. And
Uh-huh.
if they need more, they can come back here for a special
Okay,
variance
good point.
request and still come to us and
200.
ask.
It is.
And it doesn't happen often.
Yeah, and they'll come with good reason.
Right.
Yeah. Well, and the one that you were just showing us, it could have been flipped so easily.
Right.
To be easier on the people that live there.
There is one thing, I thought I got it in here, but I'm not seeing it, and I hate to bring this up when you guys are almost ready to make a motion. But would you like me to add something in the parking court section regarding, like a vegetative buffer and or screening, like fences? I thought I got that in here, but I'm not seeing it.
I was trying to kind of stay away from it just from the fact of somebody trying to squeeze it into a really dense downtown area. That would make it too, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Where you have
I
the C2, you have a 5-foot vegetation buffer in downtown, you don't. And if you had, some type of screening would be nice, but again, would it be limiting you in terms of what you could do in a really tight area?
Well, in 1798-120 has landscaping and screening, and so A in that section says screen of all parking areas containing 4 or more spaces, and then it kind of goes into that. So I don't know if you as a body think that's sufficient, or if there should be something specifically in the off-street parking requirements section.
I'll leave
I
it
think, yeah.
to you.
I mean, I don't know. In the 2 subdivisions we've had off-street parking courts, we've used this landscaping and screening, and in both times the developer's been very fine with just adhering to it. So I don't think it's really been an issue.
Yeah.
Okay.
It looks fine.
I was just gonna ask one more question before we do anything with that. And it was in the public comment, I think, both by Tyler and Ray. It was, and excuse my ignorance, but it's about the cul-de-sac measurement. And they pointed out where the measurement should be started from. and they were asking for a little more detail. I just didn't know if you could expand on that for me, what that meant.
I think the detail was, I'm not an expert on this either. I think the detail was the reason why we created the cul-de-sac exhibit. I think Tyler was asking to explain the PRC and the PT and what that meant and the location of those.
When
I
I
mean-
read it, and I just didn't understand it, so I was like,
Yeah, I think he was saying, could you define where the return of curb is on a cul-de-sac? So I think he was saying like, that's why on
and that was
this-
gonna be where a driveway could go?
Yeah, so a driveway would have to be, after the cul-de-sac ends, then the 15 feet, and then a driveway could be located after that.
Okay.
I think that's what he was defining.
That-
We sent his comment to the public works director and then to our engineer, and then they created these two exhibits. Because they agreed that our code did not do a good job of explaining this whatsoever. They agreed with both Ray and Tyler. So I believe we addressed it through
I-
these exhibits, but I can't promise you that.
I didn't see it, not saying I was perfect in it,
Yeah.
but I did look for it, and I didn't see it designated, but it might have been in the graph, or the table, I mean, and I didn't know if it, I just wanted to bring it up to make sure it got looked at.
It's good.
I'll look again and see if I see it real fast, I just couldn't find it earlier.
We need to ask that it be looked into.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah, we'll make sure it's looked into further before we send it on to council. I think it was addressed, but I'll double check on that.
Oh, is it page 10F? The nearest edge of a driveway approach should be located a minimum of 15 feet from the point of curvature or tangency of the curb return?
Yeah, so that's if you have like a, is there a white up? Oh, here we go. So if you have like an intersection, this is what a lot of people have been confused about. If you have like an intersection, like, say this is a curb, that wasn't a very good curb, but say that's a curb. You have to mark out 15 feet from here, or from where the end of the curb is down.
The start of the
Yeah.
curve.
The radius.
Okay.
So
Yep.
say this is,
Yep.
say this is the end of the curve where it starts going straight.
Then you
and
come
this area
back.
has to be 15 feet, and then you can put the driveway right here essentially. And that's so that the driveway is not too close to the curve,
Mm-hmm.
where there might be somebody, somebody's approaching this way, and then they start to make the turn. The driveway we want to be far enough away from where they're making the
For
turn movement to
visibility,
be able to
right.
stop.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then the cul-de-sac thing gets even more complicated.
All right. Somebody close our hearing.
I move we close the public hearing, or hearing.
And a second from somewhere?
No second.
Okay.
I was thinking, sorry.
Been moved and seconded to close the public hearing at 9:04. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Okay, are you ready to move to a motion? Or do you want to discuss more?
No, ready for motion.
All that
Ready for a
I've picked
motion.
up is,
Is the motion moving it to 200 feet and making sure the PCTPB is?
a legend is set on the diagram.
There you go.
PRCPT, that's it.
I mean, what we could do is, I think instead of putting it on the diagram, just putting it in the code what those acronyms are.
There you go.
Mm-hmm.
That might make some, because we get kind of after I, we can put that down there, if that's fine.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it would, to me, it was, for me,
Yeah, I agree.
I just was a little confused when I read it, so if I'm a little confused, somebody else might be, so.
I'm a little confused.
Now, I think I asked this last time we sent some code to city council. Will you go in, if our suggestion is to change it from 400 to 200, do you change it and then send it to city council with 200? Or do you send it with the 400 and our comments that we would prefer 200?
No, I mean, I don't know how other cities typically do it, but how I've always done it in all cities I've worked for is your recommendation now is the official and only recommendation they'll get.
Okay.
The record will include the recommendation before you tonight, so if they wanna look at what the changes are, and I'll
Mhm.
probably in my staff report just explain the changes.
Mhm.
Okay.
But no, the recommendation from planning commission, I'm not gonna go in with like my recommendation plus yours, no.
Mhm.
Whatever mine is plus your changes is now the official recommendation.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good, got that understood. All right, with that in mind, somebody wanna make a motion? This is a forwarding to city council.
I motion that we forward the parking recommendations, changes over to city council for approval with the change of 400 to 200 feet.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to forward to city council our approval of 19043 with the one change of the distance from 400 to 200 feet.
Who was the second on that?
Commissioner Logan?
Okay, ready for a roll call?
Sure. Commissioner Lasowski,
Yes.
Commissioner McLean-Wenzel,
Yes.
Commissioner Logan,
Yes.
Commissioner Mobley,
Yes.
Commissioner Mayton,
Yes.
and Chairman Crosby.
Yes. Motion carries off to the council.
I just had a few things, but I was gonna let David off mine.
Oh, yes.
Thank you, David.
You can go home now.
Okay, no problem.
Okay.
Thank you.
Talk to you later.
Talk to you soon, yep, bye.
Our invisible attorney.
I don't wanna pay him all that additional.
You think he'd build one?
Attorney. Attorney.
Oh, right. Where is he working on this?
Get him off the phone as soon as possible.
Billing something else too.
Yeah, right. He's got two phones there.
So
Okay.
just a couple quick things. So the next meeting is going to be March 30th. So we actually got, I think, 5 weeks in between them, which is nice because they've been about every 2 weeks for a while now. And then April will be April 27th. And then the May one, I just sent out a doodle poll today because the typical fourth Monday is Memorial Day, so we won't be meeting that day. So if you haven't responded to that poll, if you can respond to that poll, or just send me what date works. The 3 days I sent out were that Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday after Memorial Day. So it'll be one of those 3 days. It looks like most people can make it work, any of those 3 days. And then in June, we'll just have to discuss that as it gets closer, because I'll be gone for like half of June, so. I wanted to introduce everybody to Shelley
Oh.
Dennison.
You're trying to figure out who you were.
She's back there awfully quiet.
She's our newest planner that started last week, so, or 2 weeks ago now, I guess. So she's been with us for 2 weeks, and we're very happy
You
to
a
have her.
Buckeye?
Yeah.
Okay, I thought so.
The Ohio State. And other than that, we're still pretty busy. We're getting in a few planned developments, I think, in the next couple weeks. So that will keep us very busy. On the upcoming schedule, in March, you'll see Sandy Vault again with some modifications to it. You'll also see Trillium Machinery, which is an expansion on their operations down there on Industrial Way. And they have quite a few variances and code deviations that they're looking to get done. And then in April, you'll be seeing a subdivision with a zone change and comprehensive plan change. So you'll again be looking at the proposal of existing commercial to residential. And then there's also a chance that if everything is still going smoothly, that is potentially the night you'd also hear the annexation and zone change for the property with Gunderson Road, the UGB expansion you just approved. So if it gets approved by council and then approved by Clackamas County Commissioners and there's no appeal to the state on the UGB expansion, then you'd be most likely getting that annexation on April 27th. And then the May one, I don't know what we'll have yet, but it's probably gonna be full just with all the applications we're getting in. We have Clackamas County health services that potentially could be on the May one, maybe the June one. And then we have the PDs that are also coming in. And then the only other thing I want to mention is that sometime in the near future, maybe the May meeting I was thinking, maybe the June meeting, but I would actually like to have a work session and we would do a dinner again. And then we have some code changes that I would like to discuss with everybody. And I think we might even be able to cover 2 chapters, since one of the chapters would basically be all new code that Shelley's working on, and then one of the other ones would be a smaller change as well. And then later in 2020, we'll be bringing Sandy style to you, and then also, hopefully, I'm gonna try to bring more changes with the mixed use stuff that you guys were looking into and did the work session on. So hopefully, we'll start looking at that again pretty soon. That's kind of my update. I don't know if
Space age.
Oh, thank you, Jerry. See, that's why. So, yes, thank you. So, Space Age, which you approved, and it has approval now for a couple years, they sent me an email, I think last week. I forwarded it to Jerry. And basically, they're asking, the approval was heavy timbers, so wood beams, and now they're asking if instead of wood, they can do steel or metal and then just paint them. I told them it was not a staff decision, it was a planning commission decision, since it was appealed and it went to you. So therefore, I mean, I work with applicants to make little tweaks here and there if needed, but on something like that, that was specifically mentioned by their architect as being heavy timbers, I typically wouldn't just allow them to switch it to a different material type, especially since our code's very prescriptive on, well, and very prescriptive on how much metal you can have on the outside of the building. They used, as Jerry saw, the Sandy Fire Station as an example of a location that's used metal instead of heavy timbers, and while that's true, they were also approved to use heavy metal steel instead of timbers through the planning process. So I kind of am just going to put it on you guys, and whatever decision you make. It's kind of outside the realm of a planning decision, since the case has already been open and
Is
closed.
it the whole?
It's already
okay.
decided.
Exactly.
Is it the whole?
I think it would be everywhere where there was wood, timbers would now be
Yeah,
metal.
they have a rendering. Now, you say it's our decision, but it's not until it comes to us.
I think they would, well, that's, so I kind of wanted to get a pulse from you guys. I don't think it would come before you, because I think,
Oh, okay.
so I guess the only way they could probably do it is a modification to the design review.
Yeah, that
No.
just seems like a big change, and, you know, they got their lights, I mean, we did all of our discussion, and it seems very different than what we're trying to accomplish. I mean, it's one of the first things people are gonna see coming out from this, from
We even,
Portland.
we even eliminated the phase 2 issue.
Yeah, and they told us that they couldn't do it without the light, and I actually saw a space age in Gresham that doesn't have the light.
Yeah.
So I
And-
feel a little duped.
And I thought maybe when you started talking about that it was for some structural reason, to one thing maybe in the canopy.
Maintenance.
No. We didn't.
Yeah, that's my thought too, was if it took somebody this long to realize that steel is easier to maintain than wood, I don't know.
Sure, I stand by our original, vote with
Yeah,
making
we did
no
a lot of
modifications to
give
it
and
at all.
take on
I mean, if they came back, they would have to go through an actual process, but I just wanted to get them a pulse of, and I
Yeah.
typically don't do this because now we've already discussed it, but at the same time, they're asking us like way after the approval. And it wasn't my approval, it was the planning commission's approval.
Mhm.
I feel like we made a lot of accommodation on that site with
Yeah.
sewer
Well, think
and
about,
everything
yeah,
else, so.
Yeah.
think of the accommodations
In
we've
the
made, like
future
on
building.
windows, and how that comes back to haunt us.
Right.
We make this. and-
It would just, I mean, that would be a unbelievable precedent.
Mhm.
I agree.
Yeah.
Way too late in the game,
Yeah.
in my opinion, but
Yeah.
again, it
Yeah.
wasn't my decision, so.
And I'll suggest Don would agree with us.
I think that's safe to assume.
Fair to say, I think. Put words in his mouth, but.
I had one thing to ask you and ask staff that would be helpful to me. On these long applications, if you could, in the PDF format file, bookmark put in a bunch of bookmarks. I mean, I can do it myself when I download it to my computer at home, but then I get here and I don't have
I
that
can't find it.
file.
Yeah.
I can't
Me
get
too.
to it, and I should probably learn how to get to it. So what I did on the other one was like when I put David's letter, I just bookmarked it and called it David's letter. So I can pull up the bookmarks when I'm in Adobe and pop right to these sections.
So you're saying bookmarks in the PDF file?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, I can do it myself, but then I have a problem getting it here unless I can figure out how to do it on my cloud copy.
And we can certainly try. I don't know if it'll allow us to do it and then upload it into iCompass and if you'll be able to actually use the bookmarks.
Yeah.
But we'll try it.
Okay, I see on this one, the one on the code changes, when I go up to the bookmark and click on it, it has two. It says cover and exhibits A through H. So somehow they were put in there. I didn't do that.
That's the system bookmarking it. So the system, when I uploaded the files, one was the staff report and one was A through H. So that's the system bookmarking them.
Oh, okay, okay.
But if,
So we could upload them all individually,
possibly.
each exhibit, but that might be, or at least chunk them.
We'll look into it. And
Yeah, if
try.
I can figure out how
Would
to
it-
get my copy, then I can do it, but it'd
What
be
Emily
nice
just
if we
said
had
might
one.
work actually,
heard him look
is
at
if
it.
we did a staff report and then like applicants submittal and then public comments. If we bookmarked them like that, we might be able to do it.
Oh, yeah,
That would
yeah,
be
just
nice.
major areas, cause you see,
Okay.
there's times where we say,
Roll.
what page are you on? And we're scrolling
Gotcha.
like crazy to get to it.
Or waiting for it to
Or
load.
Bookmark could,
I have you asked that, so I have a technical question then. Is there a way to have searchable PDFs? I mean, I know there is, they're not on this laptop.
I think if
Where
you
you
control
can-
F, you can search those things, can you? Or
I've,
show
I
it.
tried shortcut keying it, I tried
Yeah.
clicking on every button around it, so, cause when you do say something and I can't find
It's
it,
the reader
I typically
that you
search
do.
for it,
yeah,
so it
no,
pulls
you
it
can
out.
control
Yeah,
F,
just
you
do
can
it.
search on it.
Alright.
Does it work?
I just did court.
Why don't we do some of this discussion, like close it first?
Oh, yes.
It's
right.
difficult with scanned things
You
now.
know, you wanna go with, you
Got
signed up for
early,
this.
I know.
Okay,
I
I
think
got one.
Chromebooks,
Okay.
Chromebooks are not, I have one at home, they're not that.
I wanna get out of here.
No, control F, you
I
can
mean,
search.
it's
So that's
chit-chatting.
another way.
Can you
We
search
Well, yeah.
the scanned documents or just the PDF portion?
Probably
Just
this
the
one's
PDF.
Yeah.
Ke-
Publish
Usually
the
it's
PDF.
not scanned documents.
Kelly, after the, I think I'm also on the Sandy Fire District Board. And after the last go-around we had, I went back and just, I think, I don't know if Chief Schneider's got a hold of you or not, but is to go through the response that's in the staff report from the fire department to really make clearer what some of the fire codes are, state fire codes are.
What are you referring to?
Bailey Meadows,
Well, they didn't submit anything in writing.
I know.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, as I said, I thought for the public interest, it would have been
Helpful.
helpful to have that. And there's a
For
new
the fire
fire.
district to submit comments? Oh, yeah, I agree, we asked for them several times.
Yeah, so I'm just kinda saying this publicly, you
Oh,
and I
okay,
talked
gotcha.
about it.
Oh.
And to, because the 30, after 30 houses, or 30 whatever habitations, you have to have a second egress. Okay, and just seeing that on it would've,
Yeah.
I don't know what it would change or whatever, but I think it may be easier for the city to say, here's reasons why, or timings, et cetera, I don't know.
Good catch.
But there's a new fire marshal in town that does the revisions, and I just said, I think it would be good for the, again, they're just state codes, and I didn't see anything of it. They said, well, they're state codes. I said, but it's not in the record that you guys put together and helping Emily or whoever else is putting it together, so they're gonna reach out to you.
Yeah, I don't know if they quite understand, but if they're not in the record, then they can't be part of an appeal to LUBA, so.
No.
I know.
And I've told the fire chief and the fire marshal this, but yeah. So I'm glad to hear that they're, might be changing how they submit their comments.
so.
And I would, just one final comment for me is based on some of the comments in our last meeting is, I want to tell you, Todd, that I appreciate having you on the planning commission.
Thank you.
It was-
I'll second that.
I'll third that.
It was just, yeah, I didn't understand some of the thinking, to be honest with you. It just didn't make any sense. They didn't, how your action biased anything else is just beyond me.
It just tells me that we need to do, I think we can do a better job of educating the public on what our roles and responsibilities are and what our authority levels, where they stand. Because I think there was, based on the comments I read on social media, a lot of people thought, we made a bad decision, but I don't think they knew what we were allowed to make decisions
Yeah.
on.
Yeah, and
And
then we
and
don't
we were not
necessarily have to
extorted.
like the decision.
Yeah,
that we
and
make.
that's something I talked to Chris about that, the comments about being afraid to be sued. And I thought about that afterwards, and I thought, no, wait a minute. When somebody sues you, they sue you because you did something illegal. So why wouldn't we not want to be suable? We want our decisions to be ironclad legal. I mean, that's one of our goals. So in a sense, that is trying to keep us from being sued. If we just came in here and made willy-nilly things, go ahead, that would be irresponsible.
I think there was some confusion about what's suing and what's just appealing a land use decision.
Mm-hmm.
'Cause I think a lot of what went said and went in the record is just building the record, which is land use.
Mm-hmm.
So you do that, so if you need to appeal later, it's in the record on appeal.
Mhm.
That's not, I got the impression
not
that
threat.
people were taking that as a threat to sue, but it's,
Yeah, and
I think there was
Oh, yeah.
confusion there, that's what I observed.
that's true.
That's my.
Yeah. But I think that we should be concerned that our decisions are strong,
That
and we
actually
are,
does.
you guys are.
That does bring up a question for me, actually. On nonprofit boards that I've served on, the individual board members are covered if they're sued through their work as a board member. What happens to the
You'd have to
planning?
talk to our attorney about that.
That's a
Okay.
good question.
And we hung them up.
Yeah. Okay, that's
No,
okay.
that's
I'll ask
good.
him.
See, it's a good question.
That
I
is a
do,
good
I do
question.
know that the city's liability insurance, this is about all I can tell you on this. The city's liability insurance for volunteers, which you are a volunteer, does cover you under some circumstances. I don't know how far or how little that covers you.
And it's capped, right, on what the award can be given.
I think so, but I don't know, I think if you're sitting up on the dais and you're making a decision or a recommendation, I think it covers you under that. I mean, you'd
Yeah.
have to ask our attorney.
Would make sense.
But if
Okay.
you're like out in the public making comments as a commissioner, I don't know if
Yeah.
it really protects
Yeah.
you there.
Right.
No, I'm not worried about that.
No.
I don't know, that's a
Okay.
great question, it's something that, David could, next time he attends, maybe at the end of
Yeah,
March,
ask
I
him.
give him a heads up, he'd give you a 5-minute summary about it at
Perfect.
maybe the end of the
Right.
meeting.
That'd
Yeah,
be great.
yeah.
I thought the coming up here and the accusing Todd of sitting with whatever, was, just crazy, amusing at best, okay? And I call for it. But I think there is one point that I think they have, I don't wanna say right, but look into, and that is the number of times you have to recuse yourself.
That's true.
And they're saying that the voting strength here, or representation of the city base is diminished because of that. So, I mean,
It would go
It's
for
fair.
any absenteeism from the council or from the commission.
Right,
Any-
right. If you
you're
just
absent
quit
because
coming to
of-
meetings.
Right.
Yeah.
It's a similar inference, right?
Yeah,
Mhm.
it is.
All things considered, that would go.
well, it's similar for the
It's-
fact of a non-planning attorney is, if you did that and you had so many absences, excused or unexcused, then there's some things set forth for it. But, recusing,
Yeah.
is a different. And I'm not saying that's the case here, but I'm just trying to state the one thing that I thought had something
Yeah,
to it.
Some validity, yeah.
And all
That's
for
fair.
legitimate reasons. That's-
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, it's the right thing to do,
yeah.
and
We just
Yeah.
wished you didn't have as much business in Sandy.
Well,
Quit it.
I don't know, maybe it comes in waves, cause a lot of what
That's
Kelly
true.
was talking about, one of those things I think we're working on, but I think a lot of them are not.
Good.
Which I guess is
Good.
good where I
Right.
sit here, but then the other part is like, what's going on? How come we're not?
Because those transportation studies are not easy to understand, and it's
No.
nice to have an interpreter
it is.
up here. So, okay.
I want to echo just one more thing
Mhm.
Commissioner Mobley said earlier. It's not necessarily the argument here that will make the biggest difference. It's when the codes are being created and developed and the policies around those where we need the public's support and opinions to help influence the direction the city takes. Once the codes are made, we just have to support them.
Mhm.
And that's a different context.
Yeah, and I applaud Kelly for your reaching out to developers and people, because you can't say I told you so. 'Cause
Yeah, I think most
they
people
had-
that I reached out to really appreciated it too,
Mhm.
even if they didn't have comments.
Right,
So,
right,
that's
right.
for the
Probably
record.
shocked.
Which we updated everything.
Whoa. Okay, who wants to have the honors? Just go ahead.
I motion that we close the, Can we go home?
I'll second that.
Been moved and second to adjourn at 9:27. All in favor,
No, I-
say aye.
Aye.
Aye.